Hello, David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome back. All right, as you could tell by that thumbnail, we've got a pretty interesting conversation. It's a topic called nostalgia, and it's something that isn't usually talked about. We're so busy talking about movie rankings and clothing. This is going to be something new, so I've got to invite some special guests to help me. I can't do this on my own. So without further ado, let me introduce again to the show, Phil,
Hey.
Bill, and not to keep the rhyme going, Calvin. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello, David.
That would have been so cool if I had someone named like Lil or something like that, but no.
Gil.
Gil would have been good.
Do you know any Gils? Sorry, Calvin.
Yeah, no, I'm really sorry. I can change my name for the purpose of this recording if you'd like. It's easy enough to do here.
You got to be you, as much as we'd like you to
Yeah,
change your
that's
name
right.
constantly.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, here's the premise, and we've got to start this off. It is undeniable that the Bond franchise, our connection, the group's connection to the Bond franchise, can sometimes be fed by nostalgia and not just appreciation of the now. So I figured, let's really explore the word, the entire, maybe even propaganda around nostalgia. And I dare say I did this very purposely. This wasn't, believe it or not, just the guys that could make it in the middle of the day on a weekday. No. Yeah, exactly. Oh, how you paint a pretty picture. These gentlemen all have nostalgia at their core of their very being, their very connection into the Bond community, and we're going to explore that a little bit. But let's go around very briefly, play a little game. And Phil, we're going to start with you. When I say the word nostalgia, what gets conjured up, or what does the word mean to you?
Gosh, the thing that jumps into my head was the Mad Men episode where Don Draper was doing his pitch, and he said, the Greek word for nostalgia literally means the pain of an old wound. And, you know, it's never how I thought about nostalgia, but if you roll that around in your head enough, we can probably get there. But nostalgia is a feeling for the past, right? And it's sometimes a complicated feeling for the past. Sometimes it's not necessarily just happiness and light. Sometimes it's contextualized by a sense of longing and a sense of regret and something that you don't have anymore, right?
Yeah, I like that.
No,
I like that. It's very eloquent, and we're going to gravitate to that whole thing of it's not something we have anymore, but we yearn for it. There's a craving. Calvin, what about you?
Oh, I can't be anywhere nearly as eloquent as that. I think Phil's really on something there. But for me, when you say nostalgia, the main thing I think of is just comforting, like comfort food, something really nice and warm and embracing and escapism, I guess. Just kind of going back into your childhood and maybe definitely rose-tinted glasses are involved in it, but that's nice every once in a while.
You need that, right?
Yeah.
It's our drug from time to time. And Bill, what about you? Nostalgia?
I would say, in addition to what Phil said, it's partially how you remember something, but sometimes how you remember it isn't precisely the way it was. And so sometimes when you go back and have the opportunity to go back and see how it was, you discover things. Oh, that part of my memory wasn't quite accurate. I mean, I'll give you just a non-Bond example. I had seen this thing from 1965, and I had the vaguest memory of it. And then I recently, I mean like the last 3 months maybe, it got uploaded to YouTube, and I finally saw it again after all these decades. And I remembered it maybe 80% accurate, but like that 20% was significantly different. So things like that play into it.
They do. And it's interesting too, because you three put into what I call kind of the emotional quotient into the definition. Unfortunately, when you have a bot do it, it's not so sexy. So for example, this is what you're looking at right now is what's affectionately known as a word cloud. And in this word cloud, when you put up nostalgia, it says things like retro, wood. How sexy, camera, lens, revival, graphic, telephone, old, aged, past, antique, photography. Dare I say, I'm glad that you gentlemen are here to actually help me with this, because I wouldn't want Google to be my partner in this, but I will tell you, Bill, now that you are warmed up, Let's make a quick little introduction to you through your description, because I think a lot of people think of nostalgia as this, a bunch of, Bowery boys, little rascals, pushing things down, a time of the past, and maybe that's it. But you and I did a video where we talked about nostalgia and the spy craze. And I would go so far as to say, look, nobody likes to be called a guru, at least publicly. Privately, they love it. But I would say that you are definitely the nostalgia of the spy craze guru on a lot of the Bond community discussions. Why? Why do you hearken back to that so quickly?
Well, a big reason was like I grew up on that stuff. For me, it's like it's part of who I am basically. I mean, there are like a lot of Bond fans who don't remember the spy craze of the 60s. They weren't around then or whatever, but and I find it interesting to be able to go back when you find something. And I'll give you a Bond example. So in October 65, Sean Connery goes on this show called What's My Line? Now, What's My Line the format was a panel tries to guess the occupation of people, but they also had what they called the mystery guest. And the panel got blindfolded, and then they tried, ask questions, trying to figure out who it was. So Connery, it aired live in New York, and Connery was already in New York filming A Fine Madness. And plus, at the date of this particular broadcast, the New York premiere of The Hill was going to be in a few days. So here, so it's like, mystery guest, will you sign in, please? And, Connery has this big, he has a very distinctive signature. And he comes in, and then to try and fool the panel, he affects a falsetto, or at least as good a falsetto as he could do. And it's kind of fascinating to watch. And a Bond friend of mine asked, why would Sean Connery, that was beneath him. Why would he go on What's My Line? And I tried to explain to him, like, in those days, What's My Line was like one of the major stopping off points. If you're promoting a movie, like, What's My Line was one of the places you went to be the mystery guest. I mean, like John Wayne went on What's My Line. Charlton Heston went on What's My Line. Eleanor Roosevelt went on What's My Line as a mystery guest. So it's just fascinating. It's a remnant from another era. And again, it's the extra bonus if you're a Bond fan of seeing Connery on that. And it's funny also that on that particular segment, they're kind of tiptoeing around it because by that time, Connery's kind of getting tired of James Bond and wanting to promote The Hill and other stuff. So, I mean, Bond obviously comes up, but they're being real kind of careful not to overdo it on the show.
What I'm hearing from you also in this description is that this is infotainment. You have a certain amount of titillation of telling these stories, and we've lost. If you think about what we've done, a lot of things that we've done is lost around storytelling nowadays. I mean, you've got my next guest here from an introduction is perfect to kind of bring this up because let's see if we can do this. There we go. Literally oversees and manages a magazine, some would say from a different era. But Phil, I mean, how do you kind of connect with nostalgia?
Well, with nostalgia for Fangoria, it's a completely different thing than nostalgia with Bond. But if you want to talk about Fangoria, the thing is that it's been around for 42 years. So the mail that I get about how I'm doing it all wrong is from 3 different generations. And they tie into, like, it's not the Fangoria I remember. Well, the Fangoria that you remember is 1982, and that's different from 1994, and that's different from 2007, and then we all have our favorites. And my challenge going on almost 4 years now has been to try to hear those generations and make them feel like they're still part of the conversation. But also, Fango was never a nostalgia magazine. I tried to explain that to them when they want to know why Freddy Krueger is not on the cover of a 2021 magazine. I said, well, Fango was always about what's happening right now. So nostalgia clouds our objectivity in very profound ways. And I get first person examples of that every day with the magazine because people kind of show up for that logo. There's such a value to that logo. It opens doors. Yeah. It makes Jordan Peele and Edgar Wright write articles for me sometimes because they have such an affection for that logo. But the magazine itself has to keep moving forward. And despite all the people angry that I'm covering Midsummer or I'm covering, films that they don't think count as horror. It's a battle, and nostalgia can be an obstacle as much as it can be anything else that we've called it so far, I think.
There's a couple of articles out there around nostalgia as a marketing device, which we're going to talk a little bit about shortly. And they talk about the fact that nostalgia, as long as it's 80% on target, you've got to create the other 20% for something new and different. Because even people who want to go back, well, they realize when they do go back to exactly like it was, and Bill, I think you were insinuating this, it is tainted. It doesn't hold up, so to speak. So you've got to keep evolving it just a little bit.
Yeah.
And also sometimes you can offer a tidbit or even more than a tidbit of something you didn't realize. So, for example, in 1983, there was the magazine called Starlog had this interview with Richard Maibaum. Now, this was when you had 2 Bond movies coming out the same year, and so it was a pretty interesting interview. But this was like the first time I ever saw that they had, Maibaum said, yeah, they actually asked Jack Lord to come back for Goldfinger to play Felix Leiter, but he wanted a lot more money and he wanted bigger billing. And no thanks, Jack. I had never heard that. And so when you can combine what you like from the past with new revelations, that makes it even better. And that's a prime example of something like that.
That's always what I'm looking to do. So when we say, well, what else is there to say about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? Well, I went to Texas and interviewed a fan who bought a location from the film and restored it. So that becomes a human interest story, and it becomes a story about fandom, and it's like a new way to talk about this thing that there's really probably nothing left to say about. So if I can get that hook, like you were saying, if I can get that, here's the thing you remember, but here's an entirely new thing that we can talk about in that space, that's always the sweet spot for me as far as the magazine goes.
Phil, I like how you put that too about changing it in a new way and then sharing that with a group, because I think nostalgia is not an individual situation. I think the best nostalgic moments are shared by like-minded individuals. And I'll give you a perfect example. There may have been a couple people scratching their head on the preheat to this video saying, well, I get why Bill's here, and Phil's clearly got a little bit of gray, and we know David's an old man. What the hell is Calvin Dyson doing here? But I would fence with that and say that Calvin does quite a bit as a YouTube star, and I won't even put that in quotes, to revisit a lot of what I would consider older movies and older information and celebrate them and provide new information and points of view and clips from televisions. But Calvin, why? I mean, what does that draw as somebody who is just burgeoning on their early 30s to do this?
Or what, to go back kind of beyond the...
Absolutely. Even in an era that you haven't lived in.
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. Because I suppose like some of the like historical documents that you see, like old Bond promo material, like I've got no nostalgia for... Cubby Broccoli doing some vox pops on the mountain in Rio saying science fact and all that kind of stuff. And yet there is still something about it. And I think for me, actually, a lot of nostalgia comes from a lot of the DVD extras and the like that I grew up with, if you can even be remotely nostalgic for those kinds of things. And I think a lot of my affinity for that kind of material comes from those things. I think there's something quite cute about interviews from the sets at the time of they were making these Bond films and all that.
Well, I was about to say an example of one of Calvin's videos, and this is fairly recent. He had these. It was from, I guess it's from Home Video Extras. The auditions of Theodore Beikel, and I forget the other actor, but I've seen him on a lot of things, because everybody assumes, oh, Gert Frobe was always going to be Goldfinger. Well, no, it's like, when you write about something historical, it's like, it makes it interesting when you show, no, things might not have turned out the way you thought they could have. And it was interesting to see those screen tests. I had just seen a bare clip of the Theodore Beikel one, and I had never even seen this other guy's screen test. And I thought that was interesting. And then in addition to all that, I mean, I have this book about the making of Goldfinger, and Richard Maibaum had actually recommended Victor Buono. Now, as far as I know, he was never tested or considered seriously, but Maybaum did recommend him in a memo as part of it was part of a longer memo. So yeah, I mean, yeah. So just because the movie's been made and we know it by heart doesn't mean it was always going to be the way it turned out. And I get into that a lot as well when you get into the making of this stuff and you see the choices that were made and it could have gone this way or that, and there's no way to tell that from the finished film.
But that's a unifying theme that I'm hearing from all of you, as much as we're a little bit of the word cloud, a little bit not, is that discovery, finding those little hidden gems, that treasure chest of information, even in something we thought we knew so well and was so familiar. And I think, Phil, you may have mentioned this early on, the whole idea of nostalgia sometimes, and Calvin, I think you did too, is the comfort level. In a world where we don't know what's happening tomorrow. Is there another lockdown? Is there another variant? What's going on? Is Phil's arm going to improve? We don't know. I mean, Bill's. But Phil's is fine. God, that joke worked in rehearsal. But the reality is that we are driven as humans to something comfortable. And sometimes that comfort even can make things better, possibly, than they really are. Let me explain through a visual. This is a movie that not every Bond fan likes, but damn it, because it was my first watch that I got, because it was that movie with all the tropes, it had such an impact on me as a young executive. This movie ranks in my top 5. Nobody can convince me otherwise that it is absolute mastery. Even this quad poster just makes me start to salivate. I need a drink of water. I'm wearing, because of this comfortable feeling, a Thunderball homage shirt on a group of friends that I've met through literally one franchise, who I can absolutely call friends without any hesitation. Is that the power of nostalgia? It could change the way we think about things. Does it blind us or does it help us? What do you gentlemen think?
Just on Tomorrow Never Dies, because I'm really interested that you picked this one in particular, because this is the one that I think, like, growing up in the 90s, early 2000s as a Bond fan, this is the one. It's not my favorite of that era. It wasn't the first one I saw on the screen or anything like that. It is the one of that era that I do have the most nostalgia for. And I think a big part of that is there are some Bond films that are more set in their time than others. Obviously, you can date any film by the haircuts, the clothes, all that kind of stuff. But there are some Bond films, and I think A View to a Kill is another one from the 80s that they just have. They have a lot of tech. They have some of the settings are just very relatable. And Tomorrow Never Dies is one that I think I have so much nostalgia for, because I remember the phones like that. I remember my dad having that. I remember a neighbor having a BMW similar to what he has in that film. There's just so many elements of it that make me think of my childhood and the time that I was kind of growing up watching these films. But no, I love that you picked that film, because that was the one that I was sort of thinking of, mulling over in my head coming into this video.
It's amazing to me that if I had Calvin right now on one of these Zooms back in 1997, I'd be arrested. So, I mean, it's interesting how times change. But Phil, what do you think? I mean, what is this that I'm encountering?
Well, what you talked about was interesting, because it did resonate for me. And I've talked to you about this a little bit, and I've written about this, so you can cut this down as you need to. But for me, Bond was always my dad's thing. And it was something that I did with my dad. It was the Sunday night movie on ABC, going to see Octopussy and View to a Kill, not enjoying Pierce Brosnan with him. Like, we both kind of didn't like that. But so the thing that happened is that my dad passed away in 2004. And it was a very profound effect on my life, as anyone could imagine. But what happened right around that same time is they started to talk about rebooting the series, and the Daniel Craig thing started to happen. And I frankly needed something else to think about. So I sort of dove in. I dove in backwards, and I revisited stuff that I'd watched with my dad, and I investigated the books that I remember from being on his shelf and whatnot, and read them all that summer. And in a weird way, the Craig era was nostalgic for me, but it was a nostalgia in that I was very mindful that I was experiencing something that I wished I could have experienced with my dad. Yeah. And I was not able to. So it's maybe not the textbook definition of nostalgia, but it was very interwoven with nostalgia for me. And he was alive when Batman came out, but we watched Batman the series together. So when the Batman movie came out, that was something that my dad and I had to do together. So this was very much tied to the past, but not in a very direct comfort childhood kind of way. It was sort of filling a void that was happening at the time. But the other thing you said, which I never would have expected, was the experiences that absorbing the franchise has afforded me since then. I've gotten to write about it. I've been quoted in books about it. I've met new friends here. I've traveled to GoldenEye and to Venice and London, and it's all been sort of launched by this maybe sort of grief-fueled deep dive into the franchise that happened some 17 years ago now. It's crazy to think that was 17 years ago, but yeah.
Well, I want to show you something. And by the way, none of these guys, the audience needs to hear this. None of these guys saw this wonderful Rorschach of images that I'm throwing up to start the conversation. This literally was the next one, which is the whole idea of, not just dads and sons, but parents and any of their offspring, anybody connecting with Bond and driving that fuel. I've said almost ad nauseum in many discussions and interviews that for me, it was a dad who my father was incredibly successful from a businessman standpoint, wasn't the type of guy to go to throw a ball in the backyard. Never. And anything I did, Bill and I have talked about this, watching Batman and series, never. In fact, the only shows he watched were sports shows. And when I asked him to explain to me football, American football, he wasn't going to have it. So, literally, he was the smoking pipe, wafting den type guy. However, when there was a Bond film on, he would say, David, I want you to check this out. And we would watch Bond films together. So this, to me, has always been this rolling ball chasing, this idol of probably a connection with my father. But it's so nostalgic because when I watch a Bond film today, like The Spy Who Loved Me, which was probably the first one I saw with him in the theater. I'm that old, Calvin. It just brings me back, and I get so comfortable, and I slink down into the couch, and I pull the blanket up a little bit higher, and it's comforting. It just really is.
Well, also don't forget fathers and daughters.
Absolutely.
Because you were talking about Tomorrow Never Dies. I took my daughter; she was 10 at the time, to see Tomorrow Never Dies, and she really liked it. And I suspect it had a lot to do with Michelle Yeoh, because I remember when we went the first time, there was some malfunction. I don't know if they were still using film to show the movie at that point, but it was something like film where it's like during the climactic sequence, it was like a hole got burnt in it. And they couldn't show the rest of the movie. So I got a refund and came back the next day to see it again, just so we could see the ending.
Well, Bill, do you have kids? I should know this, but I don't.
I have a grown daughter.
Oh, grown daughter. Okay. As opposed to an ungrown, just semi-purposed and not formed yet.
Yeah,
got it. Yeah. So do you get her involved in the Bond films? Did you gunpoint or? Not
deliberately. If she wanted to see him, I'd take it to that. She and her cousin wanted to see GoldenEye, for example, in '95. I took him to see that. Sometimes I take her to see movies, but I didn't want to force it upon her. I just figured it was something, if she wanted to see it, I'd do it. There was, as an adult, she encountered a problem and needed to kind of take her mind off of it. So I offered to take her to see Doctor Strange in 2016. I'd already seen it, so I knew what it was like. But she hadn't, so she went with me, and it was basically to get her mind off her problems. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the reason I ask is because I think I did the Clockwork Orange thing where I got toothpicks in their eyes, and that just it blew back in my face because they can watch a Bond film, but it takes an incredible amount of barbiturates.
Well, you did that video with your son, and you watched Never Say Never Again, but you watched the version where they dubbed out the original music and put in the Barry music.
I know. We didn't realize until like 15 minutes in, and he was enjoying it. My son's very much like Calvin, and loves, Octopussy, A View to a Kill, and Never Say Never Again. So I don't know where I went wrong as a parent, but
Yeah, so your son didn't get the full Michelle Legrand effect of da 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 wah wah da wah wah. Just
no. But I'm going to play back that clip just for him, so he does. Imagine doing the whole film to Bill Koenig's lovely voice. Well, Calvin, all right, as the young statesman in the group, I do want to talk about a subject that you've actually talked about on your show. Everybody's going to weigh in here because there's a lot of, as we approach a new movie, there's a lot of conversation that goes on around, I hope this shows up. I hope they go in this direction. And a lot of that is based on the nostalgic feeling of the things that we love and gravitate to. Dare I say, we tend to call these things the tropes, the things that we identify with James Bond, things like that wonderful gun barrel that you're seeing, like, well, they better have it in the front. How much do you think the tropes align to this definition of nostalgia, of making us comfortable versus you gravitating maybe to something like, no, I want something a little bit different? Is there a tough balancing act there?
I think I think it was you or Phil earlier on that mentioned about the percentages, or, you need 80% to be nostalgia, 20% new, like that. And that's kind of like, whoever said that, and I was thinking about Bond, I was like, oh God, yeah, that's been there since the start, really. This kind of doing a lot of these same things over again, but with kind of a new skin. And Bond is very much, I guess, because there's so many of them, you can kind of pinpoint out the elements about, we've seen Goldfinger as a story has been done however many times throughout the series history, but just with a new skin. A View to a Kill is just Goldfinger for a different era. So I think those things become very important to Bond fans, and particularly because so much of the marketing is surrounding the Bond cocktail, as it were, and that you are led to expect that you can go to this film and you will have, 2 or 3 beautiful women that Bond is going to have sex with. He will have a collection of gadgets. He will have a very nice car and all those kinds of things. So it's so built into the recipe is so well known, I guess. I think they're very important to Bond fans, and I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of had to do a bit of a re-appreciation, I guess, when Daniel Craig did come into the role, because I remember, like, when Casino Royale got released in 2006, I think I must have been like 17 or whatever at that time, and you have 20 films that are all very similar in ways. Some of them might be a little bit darker, some might be a little bit lighter, but they are all kind of this one thing, and then this new thing comes along that is so very different. And I know they've been, like, dripping in the tropes here and there as the Craig era has gone on. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly one of those who, I would love a tonally, Pierce Brosnan, that kind of tone back again at some point, have a bit more fun. I think a lot of Bond fans would say that. But yeah, so I mean, for me, I like my tropes, and maybe a lot of that is feeding into nostalgia, but it is always great to have that kind of new element in there, and I think the Craig films have done an admirable job of trying to fit something new into. I think the Pierce Brosnan ones as well actually did. There were always kind of new elements of the character that we hadn't seen before.
I agree. Phil, you were going to jump in.
Well, I just want to point out that fun is not a trope. Let's not, they've been so afraid of having fun that I hate to think that it was some sort of trope that they were trying to avoid. The movie should always be fun. Fun is a universal. But it's interesting that the Craig era has proven that the tropes don't make for a good movie, and that you can make a good movie without the tropes. It's not hurt the film so much. And then toward the middle, they've avoided them all, and it felt like you were just sort of being a little too self-conscious about it. You'll never convince me that there shouldn't have been a gun barrel at the front of Quantum of Solace. Sorry. And Spectre put everything where it was supposed to be, and I don't think it made it for a stronger film, in my opinion.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the gun barrel, because I mean that's something that if ever there were a trope that caused some controversy, and it did during the Craig era, was how they were refusing to put it at the start of the film for a while, and so then you would have this sort of split among Bond fans in discussions, like on message boards and stuff, where it's like someone would say, "Oh, these are great films. Don't bother me with this gun barrel thing." And then other fans were like, "No, it's like the gun barrel thing has this kind of emotional connection. And, it's like, you're underestimating the power of the gun barrel.
Yeah, it's less a trope than a ritual in the Bond films, I would say.
Yeah,
you sit down, your studio logo, whatever it might be that year, happens, and then that gun barrel happens. It's you're getting yourself ready. It does a psychological thing to you. And then if they kept on that track, I worry that an arty director who was above putting the gun barrel at the beginning might become a trope.
Well, in the old days, there was no United Artists logo at the start of the film.
Sure.
First four, it was like, it's dark and you go straight in the gun barrel.
Yeah.
Then you start having United Artists logos, but there were like no sound, no music. It's quiet. It fades to black. Then they hit you with the gun barrel. And it had a real power. And now, well, we only really have Spectre as an example. Now you have studio logos and they have music, and it's kind of like, well, that's not quite the same mood as in the old days when they bam hit you with the gun barrel.
Well,
with that
and Bill,
sound.
think about the example that you just beautifully sang to, by the way, Never Say Never Again, where you did not have those tropes. You didn't have those aspects that we just talked about. You had some elements, but it wasn't all quite there. And for some people, Never Say Never Again is not a terrible story. The story, and even, the bad guy is defensible. It is, they're missing, that delicious popcorn taste of the 007 franchise tropes. And even with No Time to Die, what I've heard through this, wonderful grapevine of ours is people got a little nervous when the trailer came out and said, this time everything's different. Everything changes. And people are like, Screech? Wait a minute. I don't know if I want everything different.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny with Spectre. Okay, they finally put the gun barrel back at the start, but part of me wonders if they were kind of doing an extended middle finger to the audience, to all those people who've been complaining, because like Craig comes walking out and he's swinging his arm. You can see he's holding the gun, and it's like, oh, okay, all right, yeah, you want a gun barrel, kids? Okay, here it is. Here you go.
I can guarantee they're not thinking about the 0.1% that would get that he's swinging that, meaning us.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, is this like a first take? Do you have any other takes you could have used for that gun barrel? And then, of course, they had that thing. This was when Sam Mendes took over. It says, the dead are alive. So it's like the little artsy fartsy touch here for the gun barrel. So
you're saying you love that part, is what you're saying, if I read between the lines.
I will say when Cary Fukunaga did his little narrated thing, what did he start saying?
He commented about the gun barrel.
You see the gun barrel, you're in for it. So hopefully he respects that, and that's not misdirection.
Yeah.
I don't know who's going to be in the gun barrel at the beginning, but hey.
But a lot of people thought that was a better release than even the trailers, because we were like, oh my gosh, we've got a director who gets it. Mm-hmm. He thinks and he smells like us. I don't know why I put the smell part in.
Smells,
but
yeah. It was because you felt his energy and his respect and his excitement for the thing, and plus it was new. We're talking about nostalgia. We'd never seen a piece of promotion like that before. That was exciting.
The two previous movies, they'd had those video blogs, and and I was waiting. I was ready for something new, and Fukunaga provided that with that kind of, I wouldn't call it a music video, but I mean that video promotion, combination of cuts from the movie and music. So yeah, I like that a lot.
So Calvin, I see behind you, you have very authentically a plethora of Bond material, not just books, but games, toys. I see a corgi. We got to get into the whole impact of nostalgia as a marketing tool, because this I think is going to be a very interesting conversation with the four of us, because whether it's conversations we've had with each other or publicly, we clearly know that there is a marketing, very purposeful focus by Eon and Danjak, MGM, name every other distributor, to get people like us, but also people not like us. All right. So from a marketing standpoint, I'm going to kick it off by doing a little something, and that is, let's see if we can do this the right way. Hold on. Don't rush. Don't push. All right. So only because you had this literally in your background. I will kick this one off because I do remember after The Spy Who Loved Me, Bill, you'll love this memory. This is all about storytelling. Nostalgia connecting with marketing. And there's a great article by Deutsch, the ad agency, which uses nostalgia. They do Pepsi and things like that. They wield it like a saber, is basically making sure that people connect back to something that's familiar, but something they want to recapture. It's something that they've lost. And I think one or all of you said that. There's something lost in your life. You know, it's either too much newness or disconnect. And you're like, I need to find that moment, which is probably why most men have man caves, you know, to kind of like have that protective Batman layer for this. This car is something I purchased. Listen to me. My parents purchased for me after The Spy Who Loved Me. I had every year gone down to Atlantic City on vacation. It was a regular vacation from Middletown, New York. We would drive down. We would walk the $1 Million Pier. I would, you know, Phil, as you can imagine, scared the shit out of me in those scary fun houses. And then we would watch a movie, and then I would get a toy. I would get a Corgi. And since like the early 70s, it was always the Batman Corgi or the Batboat, because I destroyed them every year. And this was my renewal process. It was like a christening. Not this year. I wanted something that was Bond, and my father pointed this out. And that's one of the things that started this whole cascade. But gentlemen, each one of you has a connection to this. What is it about us having a thing, a representation of our nostalgic connection to James Bond that makes it so significant? What is it about that getting? Phil.
I'm a lifetime chronic problem collector of so many things. I've got more posters than I have wall space. I have so many things from so many different obsessions of mine. The Bond one is different because unlike, say, a Freddy Krueger glove or a Michael Myers mask or whatnot, I can slip on a pair of shoes or I can slip on a watch and leave the house and just and it's sort of just for me. And you've written about this too, like the little sort of invisible moments that you have.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thrill of being a grown-up Bond collector. I don't have a ton of toys, and I know that there are like figures and other sort of branded things that I've kind of moved away from as I've gotten older, just in terms of like space and display space. I'm not even going to turn this camera in different directions. You can saw what was around here. It would worry you. But for me, for the Bond stuff, there's the aspirational thing of it, and you sort of, if you start paying attention to the collector crowds that we run in, you learn things about, oh well, this cut of suit is better than this because it's like this and that kind of thing. And that stuff has been educational more than anything for me in this stage in life. I've been learning about stuff, which has been fun. As far as the nostalgia itch scratch thing, again, I have a poster problem, so I will not go down the Bond poster road because where will it end? Well, I mean, the Japanese posters are so beautiful. The Italian ones are amazingly hand painted. I can't let myself go there. I have to
Don't go there.
Practice some willpower.
Because we may go there shortly. You'll see, and then you'll ever be lost. But Calvin is someone that I actually just used as an example. You know, you are surrounded by these things. Even the Moonraker Funko, which is a lot of controversy.
Funko Pop.
Yep, it's the only Funko I own. I just had to. They even got me. I'm not even a fan of them, but.
But what is it about to own a thing like that?
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, like I know that, like, I often position myself here for YouTube things. It really is just kind of this little corner, and I've got some boxes down there with the old 007 Spy Files magazine from 2002 that I still keep. So there's little bits here and there. I've got a few cars and whatnot. But yeah, I'm very selective, mainly because I live in London and I rent, so I move around quite a bit. So it's just having an awful lot to box up every time is a bit much. So I'm very particular about only going for the special pieces the first one of which I guess, was my Golden Gun prop replica, which is the Factory Entertainment one. And that thing is like 12 years old now. It's when they first did it, and this is the power of nostalgia. My grandparents at the time, I was just going to university, and they gave me some money. I just passed my driving test, and they were like, we're going to give you some money, you can kind of do what you want with it, but we think you should buy the car and then you can come and visit your family back where you're away at university and everything. And obviously, what did I do? I did not buy the car. I bought that instead.
What's family?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, my logic at the time, and I think it held up, was that, well, I might get some, crummy car, which will be good for a few years, and then I'll, sell it on for scrap or whatever. Or I could get this, and it's with me forever now, because I'll never get rid of that. But yeah, no, just about like having a thing on a shelf. It is just, I think it's a nice reminder of something that you love so much. It's like, that Golden Gun, like all of these books that I've read several times over, all the Fleming ones here. It is just nice to, again, just that escapism for me anyway, particularly for Bond, because no other interest that I have represents escapism as much as Bond. Yeah. And it's just nice just being able to pick something up, have a look at it, roll that car around on the table a little bit.
And you have a GoldenEye device too, don't you?
I do, yeah, that's up there. Yeah, which is another one of those... again, it's the Factory Entertainment prop replica, but it was just something that I was always so entranced with seeing in the film, and it is just kind of nice just to sit back and have a look and reminisce and escape, I suppose.
My company has behavioral scientists that work for it. We do a lot of things around advertising, and one of the behavioral scientists came to me because he works obviously in the same building as me, and he saw parts of my collection and said, a collector's mentality, especially one that's nostalgic to a particular franchise, is all about capturing and freezing a moment in time. So you can literally take out that moment and release it anytime that you want. And Bill, we have a huge advantage having you here because you lived during the spy craze where you could walk into a store and buy something like this. I mean, what was that like?
Well, I think I mentioned this on the previous video. So I got, as a Christmas present one year, I got this set of, 007 figures. They're about yay tall, and they had a little stand. And one of the more curious ones was M at his desk, and this little plexiglass thing came up from the desk.
Yeah.
And my dad explained it to me, because that apparently was a reference to the Man with the Golden Gun novel, where, the big plexiglass thing or whatever bullet resistant thing came down from the ceiling. Well, obviously there's no ceiling, so it just comes up from the desk with the toy. And I still find that fascinating, because I assume Gilbert, the company that did it, must have had to license both the films and the books to do that. But, like there was also like a little dragon that, this little fake flame came out. And there was like a thing of Bond on the laser table.
You have the dragon toy, don't you?
Well, it got destroyed from me playing with it as a kid. No, all that stuff's gone. All that stuff's gone. And
what do you have today, though? That I thought you had a couple things.
Well, actually, in terms of Bond collecting stuff, I mostly collect scripts, and they're photocopies. They're not original, not something that was actually on the set or anything. But I find that interesting because, again, going back to what I said earlier, things the way they could have been. I just wrote an article about this Live and Let Die script. It was pretty late in the process. It's labeled as the shooting script, but there's a ton that's different.
Yeah.
Rosie Carver's white. The New Orleans airport sequence has a considerable amount more mayhem, more crashes. It's like Bond is with Mrs. Bell, and he's like trying to go down the runway, except there's two private planes coming in, and there's like cars following him, and there's all this crash and stuff. And eventually the scene ends with Bond crashing into a fence, and Mrs. Bell had actually fainted for the longest time, and then she wakes up, and they're they're at a 45-degree angle, and that's when Bond says, "Same time tomorrow, Mrs. Bell." Whoa, and it has this ending where it's not Baron Samedi on the train. It's this kind of North by Northwest symbolic ending.
You got Calvin's attention, by the way, with that.
Yeah. It's. I'm trying to remember now. It's something like you cut to a sign with a flashing red light that says "No entry," and then the sign comes down. There's a flashing green light, and the train goes by. It's like, oh, gee, I wonder what's that symbolic of.
Wow, that's really cool. There's a book or an album even with in the making for those scripts. I would be fascinated to read those. No, I'm going off on a tangent here, but yeah, I mean that's amazing. But that's that discovery that you talked about earlier, and I want to sheepishly apologize to one of our guests for this next portion of it because he begged on camera, you saw it actually moments ago, not to get into this detail, but we have to. We can't talk about nostalgia with talking about a comparison. For example, posters. When you talk about the posters of old versus the posters of today, I would, as much as probably none of us will now be invited to any premiere after talking about this, I would like your point of view.
I think Barbara nailed it. And I'll be in London at the end of September, I think.
And he doesn't need a plane ride. He'll get his own way there.
I'll row a boat to
well,
London.
Phil, you started the poster discussion. Here we go.
I mean, I literally do not understand some of the choices happening here. But and it would be easy to say, well, that's not how they make posters anymore. But there are some very striking, very amazing posters happening out there. But they do tend to slip through at this point. Even the horror world, the stuff is very sort of stark and boring. Like one poster will hit, and it's not because the poster was great, but because the movie was very popular. So you'll see other horror movies copying that poster. It's just to let the lowest common denominator crowd think that they're going to in for the same experience. I don't know what experience that No Time to Die poster is promising us right there. It looks like he's annoyed and kind of caught off guard, and it's almost like a candid. It's not particularly art directed, in my opinion. And there are smarter people than us making these decisions, so I assume we're not thinking of everything. I mean, on the other hand, if they did a great poster, we'll be sitting here talking about it now, 12 months later. Maybe that's the trick. I don't know.
But we would. And, for me, for example, I mean, the posters, you probably would all agree with this. To me, they are part of the franchise. They're part of the art. They get me excited. Look at the coloring to this. I know that when this particular one from No Time to Die was released, there was more discussion around he looked persnickety. Like he looked, almost like bothered, inconvenienced was a word I heard from people. Yeah. Look at Bond, No Time to Die. Doesn't look badass. He looks slightly inconvenienced.
Yeah, but he's waiting
what
for
a marketing
Uber.
ploy.
Like the Uber said it was 2 minutes. Where's my Uber?
I mean, Calvin, are Phil and I being, too nostalgic about the look of this? I mean, did you connect with this? What were your feelings?
No. I mean, I'm just echoing what Phil said. I completely agree that it does look like it was a candid photo. It looks like, there's very little art direction going on with it. I think it would have landed better if they'd have just released it as like a teaser image or something, or just, hey, look at this cool thing. If you announce that as a poster, like I think we all much preferred if you just want to take like a snapshot from the set of that great photo of Craig strutting down the London street, like away from the Aston, like everyone loved that, and fans like put the logo on it, so it can be done. I guess it sort of speaks to how we see movie posters these days, scrolling on your phone and you're scrolling through Twitter, and if there is something like that Thunderball, just like looking at it as I am on the screen right now, I think it's a beautiful poster that I would much rather have on my wall than the No Time to Die poster. But if I'm scrolling, through Instagram or whatever, Netflix, I might, I can't see Connery, whereas I can see Craig. So
also remember, that's only part of the poster. They had the tri-panel thing, with that, look out. It was like look up. And it was like Bond on the jetpack, illustration of Bond on the jetpack. You can tell it's illustration because he doesn't have a helmet. And he's in a tux with a jetpack. And then it was like, look down. It was like the underwater fight. And then this was the third one, look out. And that was a big part of the was part of the ad campaign.
Right, exactly, Bill. You hit it. Robert McGinnis talked about in an interview how he was given a brief. So everybody gets a creative brief. You all know what that means. But in his brief to do a lot of the posters, it was a story. It actually said Bond needs to be shown doing this. This needs to be happening. The women have gone through this. I mean, there was a whole script as opposed to we need to highlight the star of the movie, in this particular case, Daniel Craig. And I would use today as an excuse, except if you see some of the Star Wars posters that are very effective, or, some of the other posters out there in general where they show characterization, and focus and, background imagery, I still think there's a purpose behind it that can still be, illustrated.
Yeah. Well, also in those pre-home video days, you also had the double features, and in one case a triple feature. And so what they would do is they'd go back and take elements of the original poster and kind of come up with a new double feature or triple feature. And like I said, the ultimate was in the summer of 1972, because United Artists wanted to get them in the theater one last time before they went to television. And it was Spend the Night with James Bond. And so it was the first 3 films.
Wow.
And you go and you see all 3 of them. And there were elements of the various posters in that massive triple feature poster.
Spend the Night with James Bond. Whoever invented that campaign today would have been burnt to the ground. That building. Even some of the ones, quite frankly, if you look back in our beloved, Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton, with the outline, if you take a look at, for example, Craig, you line them up. You really do see from a nostalgic standpoint how, are they really playing to nostalgia? Are they playing to us who they know are going to buy a theater ticket? Or are they playing to kind of a different focus? And to Calvin's point, maybe the scrolling group, the people that are flying by very quickly, where you need to capture their attention very fast.
Yeah, I think it's Calvin's point is a very interesting one, because just, again, confining it to Craig's run, you don't see that very basic lowest common denominator. Here's his head, here's the title, before Skyfall, I don't think. And that's when streaming started, right? That's when you're scrolling through Netflix and you're just looking for, or Letterboxd. And the other thing is this is maybe a little reductive, but I think that each one of Craig's posters, the teasers were more artful and more interesting than the official one sheet. The Casino Royale one, where it's just the bottom half of his face and the poker table. Quantum, where it doesn't even have the movie's title, but it has a silhouette on the ground.
Yeah. The
Skyfall gun barrel London tube thing I was very taken with.
Yeah.
They did great jobs with the teasers, but then when it came time for the official one sheet, they were all sort of very basic.
There's a fan poster out there for No Time to Die, and I think it's clearly based on that Octopussy one had up a minute ago. And instead of the mini jet, it's that glider / submarine thing. And anyway, it had so it has Craig in a tux, traditional tux, and it had Lashana Lynch and Léa Seydoux, and they're both in very short skirts. And so this was on a Facebook page, the James Bond Facebook page. Someone was going, about how great that poster was. I said, yeah, great, but you're never going to see that in as an official
But it was all the talk for 2 weeks. People couldn't talk enough about it.
It captured the imagination, but only because the official one was so lacking.
Right.
Had they kind of nailed it, this would have been background noise.
Yeah.
But there was a void, and then this artist filled the void.
Yeah.
And people wanted that poster.
There is a certain starkness of color too, because I mean, this is just by accident, but this is what I drink out of. This is my water cup, and you can get this at the theaters. So this is you got the Coca-Cola, you get your big soda, or like me, you say, I don't want soda, I'll buy the glass. But even this, I mean, literally, it is essentially 2 to 3 colors, if you count gray as one color. So, I mean, it is have a starkness to it that people couldn't help but notice.
And on that fan poster, I mean, one reason I said you're not going to see that as anything like that as an official poster is because how short the skirts were. I said I don't think they're going that way anymore with the women.
Yeah,
I do find it interesting. Just they do just choose to have. I know that on some of the Spectre posters, there were variations that had Léa Seydoux on it, and I know that No Time to Die, we did eventually get a character poster where I think Bond had his back to the camera and all of the different characters, Rami Malek and whatnot, were all positioned around. And I remember when that one was released, I was quite excited about it because it was the first time in a while we'd had a poster like that. And a friend of mine did get in touch who wasn't really much of a Bond fan, and he was just like, well, it's like every poster that's, every Marvel, every Star Wars, they just shove in a load of characters, and I think that is interesting. interesting. When they're obviously confident enough in Craig that they don't need to show you. I know that character posters are made, and there was one for Javier Bardem and Berenice Marlowe and all those people. But the vast majority of the official ones, the main ones, are just Craig. And, Quantum of Solace had him and Olga Korolenko, but the majority of them are just him. And I think that says a lot about how much confidence they have in just, we can just say, this is Daniel Craig as Bond, and that's the marketing. That's all we need.
That's true. And this is a little bit, I know this is slightly tongue-in-cheek. And of course, as I do that, I got rid of my window. This is all very real. Here we go. So I know this kind of made the rounds. My purpose in showing this is not a mocking one. It's more of, people have said, and I'd love to get everybody's reaction, that, utilizing nostalgia, the very essence of nostalgia, is for the old. It's for people that wax poetic, and, as by evidence, if anybody's watching out there, you could see Calvin and My Son and people like that that's not the case. But does a franchise like Bond, does nostalgia smash against the wall when you have an older Bond? Does it feel like it's a relic from a previous time? And therefore, the handful of nostalgia and an older Bond, do they get in the way of a new group of people enjoying it? I know it's a big question, but I want to really embrace it if we can.
Well, you could argue they ran into that with A View to a Kill, because it was a teaser poster. You had Roger Moore back to back with Grace Jones. Now that was an interesting image, and then the main poster, you had Christopher Walken, but he was kind of a small. He was like up in the corner. That was just a weird poster. It wasn't quite like they knew what to do with it.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Do you think so? The Grace Jones, I mean, clearly fashion icon, energetic energy. Do you think that was a very purposeful match to make sure that, we still have Roger Moore, the nostalgia essence of he is our Bond, but we still have something fresh and young?
I think they were trying to market younger, because, I mean, I mentioned this on the previous video we did. View to a Kill, when it made its debut as a music video on MTV, I mean, it had a gun barrel, except the gun barrel opened up on the Eiffel Tower, and you actually had that scene with Bond and that French detective, and then Mayday kills him, and then that segues into the music video. I mean, they had done music videos before for Bond films, earlier in the 80s, but I had never seen anything that elaborate prior to that. So I think it was definitely in their mind. You can argue how well they succeeded, but I mean, there was clearly an effort being made there.
I like that. What about you, gents?
It's interesting because I think that it can work both ways. I think it can put off people maybe if they feel like someone has been so established in the role. And if you don't like Craig in Casino Royale, you're probably not going to like Craig in No Time to Die. Maybe it plays more into nostalgia, the older Bond is. I'm just thinking of, when you mentioned it, I was thinking about Indiana Jones, because obviously they're filming the fifth version of that now with Harrison Ford back in the part. And just how much your people will be revisiting that for the sake of nostalgia. And I felt that with when Kingdom of the Crystal Skull came out, and I was just 18 when that came out. So I can't imagine what it's going to be like by the time the next one rolls around. So I think it's a double-edged sword in that regard, I think.
You may be my age with all the injuries when that comes out, but it's not even there. Phil, what's your thought on this?
Well, Craig is one of the first Bonds in a while that sort of has nostalgia for his own era while he's still playing the role. There's a film writer I know of who she was 8 years old when Casino Royale came out, and she saw it with her daddy. And, she's been with Craig through high school, college, and now she's out in the world writing. And I told her, you're the review I want to read of No Time to Die. You're the writer who grew up with this Bond. So I'm curious how her nostalgia for that beginning of that era will feed her feelings toward the end of that era. But at the same time, Craig is, he's maybe, I don't know if Roger Moore saw it, but there was no internet, so he probably didn't see as much of it. But Craig has stuck around so long that he's seeing the biggest talking point when No Time to Die was announced, filmed, etc., was who's going to play him after him.
Yeah.
It's almost as if we're like, the crowd, the Vox Populi has moved past this movie that's not even out yet and wants to know who's going to play him next. Bond 26 trended bigger than No Time to Die did, I think.
Oh yeah.
Well,
And
I have this theory, or it's more speculation theory, but like I just have this notion that after about a decade, the general audience, I'm not talking about hardcore Bond fans, but sort of like the general audience is kind of like ready to move on. About 10 years is about enough. And they're like, because I found it weird too, because like, okay, you've got this new movie coming out and you keep seeing all these stories on various entertainment sites. Who will be the next James Bond? It's like the movie, Craig's last movie's not even out yet.
Yeah,
And it's like,
yeah.
can we
see.
wait? Oh, I thought of another example of where nostalgia kind of came up against trying to market younger, and that was License to Kill, because they definitely wanted to do something different than the traditional Bond poster. And you can see some of the rejected ones, and some of the rejected ones look a lot more interesting than the final one they went with. There was, I think it was Bob Peake had this one with, it was just an illustration of Timothy Dalton. He was in a tux, but it was just, Timothy Dalton with a gun, but he looked pretty menacing. It was back when the title was going to be Licensed Revoked. And there were like 2 or 3 others that, have been out there. And then like the final poster was kind of
Yeah, people are to Phil's point, I can't argue that. They're ready. My number one video this year so far was talking about the potential style for Bond 26 using Henry, Cavill as a potential Bond. And it just went like gangbusters. But gentlemen, as we round the corner of this conversation, hope is not a strategy, but I'm going to give you a chance to play with the idea of hope. And we're going to go around and essentially taking a look at Daniel Craig's tenure right here, eyes peering out around No Time to Die. If you could name one nostalgic aspect from Bond that you could implant in No Time to Die that you're hoping and wishing to see, what are you hoping from a nostalgic standpoint to experience in No Time to Die? Bill, you want to go first?
Sure. I would say bigger stakes, and I think it has been implanted, at least based on the trailers we've seen.
I like it.
Because, okay, with Casino Royale, it's an excellent film, but it's still kind of mono, and Vesper, betraying him. I mean, it's still a relatively tight kind of universe in terms of the stakes. Quantum is that thing with the water, which was apparently based on something that happened in real life. Skyfall.
That thing with the water.
Yeah, the plot with the water. Skyfall is again, it's kind of like Family Feud on a big scale. And then Spectre is, well, it's more Family Feud on a big scale. Bringing in Brofeld instead of Blofeld.
Patent pending.
Brofeld. Yeah. But in one of the trailers, if it's in a trailer, I don't consider it a spoiler. That you have Lashana Lynch saying he'll kill millions. You've got that glider / submarine thing. So clearly, I think the stakes are bigger, and that evokes various Bond movies of the past. So
yeah, I like it. Bigger stakes.
I'll go with that.
All right, Calvin, what about you?
I guess more of a fantasy element is what I would quite like. I like it where and again, looking at the trailers that we've gotten and whatnot, I think we're gonna be in for that, which I'm very excited about. Just in the sense of, Bond films always felt like they were maybe taking place a little bit in the future from where you were. Like, I'm a defender of the invisible car. I quite like that in Die Another Day. But even beyond that, just little bits of incidental tech that they'd use here and there. It just always felt like it was just that little bit in the future. It just felt a little bit fantastical, more fantastical than a lot of other kind of action thrillers of the times. And I would like a bit more of that, I think. And I think we're in for that. So I'm excited.
I agree. Phil?
I think these gentlemen covered it pretty well. I've had the same wish list since the end of Skyfall of what I wanted to see in these movies, and they haven't delivered yet. But as Bill says, the stakes got smaller over 3 films. I think Spectre tried to bring it back a little bit, but the stakes were so nebulous that it didn't stick quite so well, and so I'm excited. And so my list was, I want to see Bond save the world just once in Craig's run. I want to see some more humor, which I think with Phoebe Waller-Bridge taking the pass at the script, and subverting the James Bond to like the guy having no idea who he is, like he's trying to get into the building. I think we're in for that. And it's never going to happen, so I photoshopped it myself. But seeing Craig in his naval uniform would have been cool.
Did you do that?
Yeah,
It was masterful. I love that.
I took a few. I spent an afternoon at my day job making that thing.
Well spent. Well
Yes,
spent.
I think so.
But that's the power of nostalgia. It just destroys
Yeah.
time.
But the telegraphs that they've sent out so far in terms of what we should be expecting tell me that I might get a couple of those things, but it's still going to be in the context of this very serious era. So when you say the word hope, I think my hope is probably going to be for like whoever's next, and that they don't try to compete with what Craig has done in his run, but instead go maybe not 180, but maybe 90 degrees away from that into a more fun, adventurous space that Calvin was describing, I think.
I love it.
Well, and the thing is, even when it was in a more fun era, like the Roger Moore era, you still had moments of gravitas, specifically when Anya confronts Bond about the death of her lover. And that's like this 3-4 minute sequence. It really stands out, but it's a very grounded moment in a movie of otherwise pretty fantastic stuff. So that it's certainly possible to do that, to be more fun loving, but still have moments like that.
And I think we need fun. I mean, I know a lot of people have been saying that thematically, but I think we do need to go back to fun. I've got further hope, and I'm going to show this image, and it'll evoke the last portion of our discussion, which is looking forward to the future. This is something that we probably have all seen. This logo come up around next year. We'll be celebrating, hopefully it's a year-long celebration of 60 years of Bond. They've already started to come out with merchandise. They've teased out a whole catalog of really interesting items for us to kind of bask our financial eyes over. But gentlemen, what do we think we're going to encounter from a celebratory moment next year? Is it just going to be merchandise? Do you think we'll get retrospects? And again, I'll use the word hope. What are we hoping to do from a nostalgic standpoint around this 60-year celebration? And we'll go backwards. We'll start with Phil.
Well, I hope that they don't suddenly go, what's another 6 months, and decide to make No Time to Die a 60th anniversary release. That's my first hope.
Oh God!
I hope that they're not so excited about that anniversary that they kick the release down the road again. Beyond that, I'm curious. I don't know enough about Eon's inner workings to know this, but I'm curious what they're prepared to do in terms of being able to announce something. It would be so exciting to hear a movie title announced for even if I know they're not getting anything done, right? But what beyond the merch and beyond the marketing, what news will the franchise break about itself in the 60th anniversary? That would be really exciting. Beyond that, I'd settle for a damn Blu-ray release of the Everything or Nothing documentary, because it's just sitting somewhere in standard def purgatory, and I thought I really was taken with that doc, and I would love to be able to revisit it.
That is such a Bond fan thing to say too. It's like, here's my minimum, here's my maximum, but I would be so happy with a cracker. Just a simple saltine would be fine at this point.
But the logo was very cool, and I like that they have the retro 007 in there. It does get me excited to see what's coming next. But if history has taught us anything, it means that there's going to be some $2,000 clothing that they're only making 10 pieces of. So
I've already pre-ordered.
I like, we all know somebody who bought that Octopussy robe. It's all good, but I know.
Excuse me, I needed a silk robe. My other one looks like shit.
So let me amend that. I know 2 people who bought that Octopussy robe.
Wow, you know 2 out of the 7 then.
You and my other friend in California, who I will protect their privacy at the moment. But so I guess, all right, so there we go. I just stumbled into my answer. I want to see merch that's for the people a little bit more. I want to see something that makes it accessible. And if they need younger fans, Younger fans don't have a lot of money. They need to make something that's sort of affordable and waves in a new crowd of fans.
I like that. Calvin, you're that new young fan.
Are you broke too?
Yeah. Well, I hope to have enough money for the inevitable 4K set of the films, which I'm really excited about, and I'm fairly certain we'll get as well. But just to see some new transfers, particularly the Pierce Brosnan films, which I think are in need of a bit of a scrub up when compared to some of the earlier Connery ones. So that's like my biggest hope, really, that I'll just have that and it can sit on the shelf. I think it's going to be weird having a 60th anniversary, which is such a big number, and we're not going to have a film to really sort of rally around. So I am looking forward to seeing what kind of celebrations we do get, particularly as it's also going to be an era, I'm assuming, that we're going to have no incumbent Bond. Like Craig has already said that No Time to Die is his last one, and that's going to be a weird period to have the celebration of such an anniversary in. So I have a feeling that anniversary celebration will be almost entirely fueled by nostalgia, unless they do pull something out and announce the new Bond on the anniversary of Dr. No's release or something like that. I can imagine that coming. I know we're going to get the new Anthony Horowitz. I'm still desperately hoping that the game will come out next year, but I think that's a long shot. I think that's going to be another year or two. But
I think, by the way, Calvin, there's something potentially, and I'm just fencing here, there's something potentially freeing about not having an incumbent Bond, only from the standpoint, I think it'd be very interesting if they could muster it to get some of the past Bond alumni, even, Dalton, Brosnan, and Craig together, make it a historical moment, get some of those key players together, almost like, this is your life moment. And now we don't have Connery and Moore anymore, which is unfortunate. But can you imagine a television or a Netflix special, 2 hours where they're going and reminiscing together and, having a beer or something? I mean, I'm playing fantasy game here, of course, but we would be riveted by that, I think. Absolutely. Bill's 60th anniversary.
In addition to the comments about the merchandise, I think there should have been more kind of retrospective. And to be honest, in hindsight, they probably should have started very end of last year, beginning of this year. What they should have started with was like, hey, today's the day Harry Saltzman got that 6-month option. And because we're already in 60-year territory, I wrote about this recently, because June 29th was the 60th anniversary of United Artists announcing the new James Bond film series. I think, but I couldn't nail down the date for sure. I think June 21st was the actual meeting, 60th anniversary of the meeting between Broccoli, Saltzman, and the United Artists executives that resulted in the deal. July 6th was the 60th anniversary of the incorporation of Eon Productions.
Right.
And so now, like, as we record this, we're smack in the middle of the 60th anniversary of the search for Bond, which went on for quite a while. I guess they announced Connery on November 3rd. So, I would be like kind of making note of that as a kind of way of ramping up to the big 60th next year of, Dr. No coming out. I think they kind of missed an opportunity there. Part of the problem is if you went for like the 60th anniversary of Saltzman getting that option, doesn't like to mention Harry very much in retrospect.
Well, we have to think about the bigger crowd too, as fascinating as that might be to us. There were the celebration of Eon's, 60th anniversary of being created. I think it lasted 23 minutes on Instagram, and then we were on to, something else.
Yeah. But like, when they first had the official Eon 007 Twitter feed, I kept track of this. It was like 11 months before they ever mentioned Harry Saltzman. And you were in the 50th anniversary mode. Like, hey, there was this other guy here. But I say this as a way of kind of gradually building up to the big 60th. I think they kind of maybe missed a bet. I did notice that they did put out a 60th anniversary of the formation of Eon Productions on social media. So, anyway, that's all I have to add.
Well, I think if they want a historian, someone that understands nostalgia and the specific dates, they would be well to hire you. In fact, they could even promote you as like a Tee-hee character with your arm the way it is. Or Brosnan from The World Is Not Enough, either one.
I think my Michael
hates
G.
that.
Wilson. I think my Michael G. Wilson impression probably disqualifies me for that post.
Yes, that was another reason why they banned you from the premiere. I heard about that. It's infamous. It's wonderful. Gentlemen, I want to thank you because part of nostalgia is walking down memory lane, but also creating new, sometimes twisted memories like this one. So I want to thank you because honestly, without this, it would have been just me talking into a blank screen, which never works well. So thank you for bringing your own experiences, your own nostalgia, and a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for the invite.
Always. All right. And this has been Bill, Calvin, and Phil. And of course, me. You know who I am. And we will see you all real soon. Take care. Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to be up on the latest from the Bond experience, just click on this subscribe and subscribe to our channel. You're going to get all the latest and greatest information, plus some exclusive content. And by the way, speaking of content, here's something especially for you, just because we know you. Talk to you soon.